I never thought the woman who raised my husband would be the one to try to destroy my family. But when Child Protective Services showed up at my door with a thick file of accusations, I realized Margaret Walsh had been planning this attack for months. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The doorbell rang at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October. I remember the exact time because I was rushing to get my 6-year-old daughter Emma ready for school while simultaneously packing lunch for my 4-year-old son Jake. My husband David had already left for his construction job, and I was juggling the usual morning chaos that comes with being a working mom. I opened the door expecting to see our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who sometimes borrowed sugar or coffee. Instead, I found myself face to face with two serious-looking individuals in business attire. The woman, tall with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, held up an official badge. Mrs. Sarah Walsh. I'm Catherine Mills from Child Protective Services, and this is my colleague, Robert Chen. We need to speak with you about some concerns that have been brought to our attention regarding your children. My blood turned to ice. The coffee mug I'd been holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the entryway tiles. Emma appeared behind me, her backpack slung over one shoulder, curiosity written across her face. Mommy, who are these people? I forced my voice to remain steady. Go finish getting your shoes on, sweetheart. We'll be leaving for school in just a minute. Ms. Mills stepped forward slightly. Mrs. Walsh, we really do need to have this conversation now. It won't take long, but it's important. I ushered Emma back toward the kitchen and whispered for her to stay with Jake, then returned to the doorway. My hands were trembling as I crossed my arms over my chest. What kind of concerns? Robert Chen opened a manila folder and scanned the contents. We've received multiple reports alleging physical abuse, neglect, and inappropriate discipline methods. The reports indicate that your children may be at risk in this household. That's absolutely ridiculous, I stammered. Who would say something like that? My children are perfectly safe. They're healthy, they're happy, they go to school every day, they're involved in activities. Mrs. Walsh, Ms. Mills interrupted gently but firmly. We understand this is distressing. These investigations are never easy for families. But we have a legal obligation to look into any reports we receive. May we come inside? I wanted to slam the door in their faces and pretend this nightmare wasn't happening, but I knew that would only make things worse. With shaking hands, I opened the door wider and led them into our living room. The house was lived in, but clean. Toys were scattered across the carpet where Jake had been playing with his dinosaurs the night before. Emma's art projects covered. The refrigerator and the kitchen counter held the remnants of breakfast preparation. It looked like what it was, a normal family home. Ms. Mills sat on the edge of our couch and pulled out a notepad. Can you tell us about your typical daily routine with the children? I perched on the armchair across from them, my mind racing. I wake up at 6:30, get myself ready, then wake the kids at 7. We have breakfast together, I pack Emma's lunch, and I drive her to Roosevelt Elementary at 8:15. Jake stays with me. He doesn't start preschool until next fall. I work from home doing freelance graphic design, so I'm with him all day. We pick Emma up at 3, come home, do homework, play, make dinner. David gets home around 6 usually. We eat together as a family, do baths, bedtime stories, lights out by 8:30 for Emma and 8 for Jake. What about discipline? Robert Chen asked, his pen poised over his own notepad. Timeouts mostly. Taking away privileges like screen time if they're not listening. I've never hit my children, if that's what you're asking. The reports suggest otherwise, Ms. Mills said quietly. They describe incidents of striking, harsh physical restraint, leaving marks, excessive punishment for minor infractions. My mouth fell open. That's completely false. Whoever told you that is lying. They also mention concerns about the children's emotional state, claims that they seem fearful and withdrawn around you. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. This is insane. Ask their teachers. Ask Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez at Roosevelt Elementary. Ask Dr. Peterson at their pediatric clinic. Ask anyone who actually knows us. My children are not afraid of me. As if summoned by my words, Jake wandered into the living room, dragging his stuffed elephant behind him. He climbed into my lap without hesitation, resting his head against my shoulder. "Mommy, are we still going to the park today?" I stroked his hair, trying to keep my voice calm. "We'll see, buddy. These nice people just wanted to talk to Mommy for a few minutes." Jake studied the strangers with the uninhibited curiosity of a 4-year-old. "Are you here to play with us?" Ms. Mills smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her. "Not today, sweetie. We're just talking with your mom." After a few more minutes, I convinced Jake to go back to the kitchen with promises of cartoons on the tablet. When I returned to the living room, both investigators were writing notes. "Mrs. Walsh," Robert Chen began, "can you think of anyone who might have reason to make false reports about you? Anyone who might want to cause problems for your family?" The question hit me like a physical blow. There was only one person who came to mind, but the thought seemed so outrageous I almost dismissed it. "Almost. My mother-in-law," I said slowly. "Margaret Walsh. But surely she wouldn't. I mean, these are her own grandchildren." Ms. Mills looked up sharply. "Tell us about your relationship with her." I sank back into the armchair, my mind reeling. Margaret had never liked me. That much was clear from the day David first brought me home to meet her 8 years ago. She'd made subtle comments about my parenting from the moment Emma was born, questioned my decisions, undermined my authority in small ways. But this? "She's never approved of me," I admitted. "She thinks David could have done better. She's always been critical of how I handle the kids, but I never thought she'd go this far." "What kinds of criticisms?" Ms. Mills asked. "She thinks I'm too strict about bedtimes, but also too lenient about screen time. She says I don't dress them warmly enough, but also that I coddle them too much. She can't seem to make up her mind. What I'm doing wrong, just that everything I do is wrong." I thought about the last family gathering 3 weeks ago, when Margaret had made a comment about Emma's behavior at the dinner table. Emma had been tired and a little fussy, as 6-year-olds sometimes are, and I'd quietly told her we'd need to go home soon if she couldn't use her inside voice. Margaret had looked at me with such venom and said, "If you can't handle your own children in public, maybe you shouldn't bring them out." David had defended me, as he always did, which only seemed to make Margaret angrier. The drive home had been tense, and David had muttered something about his mother needing to back off and let us parent our own kids. "Has she ever threatened to call Child Protective Services?" Robert Chen asked. "Not directly," I said, but even as I spoke, I remembered something else. 2 months ago, Margaret had been babysitting the kids while David and I went to his company, dinner. When we got home, she'd made an odd comment about how someone should keep a closer eye on what goes on in this house. At the time, I'd thought she was criticizing our housekeeping or maybe implying we didn't supervise the children enough. Now I wondered if it had been something else entirely. Ms. Mills closed her notepad. "Mrs. Walsh, we're going to need to conduct interviews with both children, separately and privately. We'll also need to examine them for any signs of physical abuse." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "A medical professional will need to look for bruises, marks, anything that might indicate physical harm." My stomach churned. "They're going to think something terrible is happening to them. Emma's going to be so scared." "We have trained professionals who work specifically with children," Ms. Mills assured me. "They know how to conduct these examinations in a way that minimizes trauma." "When?" I whispered. "Today. We'll need to take them to our office for the interviews and then to Children's Hospital for the medical exam." The room spun around me. "You're taking my children away?" "Just for a few hours," Robert Chen said. "This is standard procedure. If everything checks out the way you say it will, they'll be back home with you this evening. I wanted to fight them, to refuse, to grab my children and run. But I knew that would only make me look guilty of something I hadn't done. Instead, I had to trust that the truth would protect us. But as I watched them prepare to take Emma and Jake away for questioning, I couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret had planned this moment perfectly. David was at work, I was alone and caught off guard, and my children were about to be traumatized by an investigation into accusations I couldn't even fully comprehend. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The woman who had raised my husband, who had taught him right from wrong, who had claimed to love these grandchildren, had set out to destroy our family. And as Emma's confused tears started to fall when I explained that she needed to go with the nice people for a little while, I realized this was only the beginning. The next 4 hours were the longest of my life. I called David immediately after. The CPS workers left with Emma and Jake, but it went straight to voicemail. Construction sites often had poor cell reception, and I knew he wouldn't check his phone until lunch break. I paced the empty house like a caged animal, my mind spinning with possibilities. What if the investigators found something innocent but made it look suspicious? What if Emma, confused and scared, said something that could be misinterpreted? What if Jake, who was only 4, couldn't properly explain a bump or bruise from normal childhood activities? By noon, I was sitting on the kitchen floor, staring at my phone and willing it to ring. That's when David finally called back. "Sarah? I saw your missed calls. What's wrong?" The words tumbled out in a rush. CPS, accusations, Margaret, the children being taken for interviews and medical exams. There was silence on the other end for so long I thought the call had dropped. "David, are you there?" "I'm here." His voice was tight with controlled rage. "I'm leaving the job site now. I'll be home in 20 minutes. When he walked through the door, still covered in construction dust, his face was a mask of fury I'd rarely seen. David was typically the calm one in our relationship, the steady presence who thought things through before reacting. But now his hands were shaking as he pulled me into his arms. "Tell me everything again," he said. "Every detail." I recounted the morning's events while he listened without interruption. When I mentioned my suspicion about Margaret, his jaw clenched. "She's gone too far this time," he muttered. "Way too far." "David, what if they don't believe us? What if they think we're unfit parents?" He cupped my face in his hands. "Hey, look at me. We're good parents. The best parents those kids could ask for. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with Emma and Jake can see how happy and healthy they are." At 2:30 p.m., my phone finally rang. It was, "Ms. Mills. Mrs. Walsh, we've completed our initial interviews and examinations. We'd like you and your husband to come to our office at 4 p.m. to discuss our findings and determine next steps. Are my children okay? Can I talk to them?" "They're fine. They'll be returned to you this afternoon pending our discussion." The CPS office was a sterile building that smelled like disinfectant and despair. David and I sat in uncomfortable plastic, chairs across from Ms. Mills and Robert Chen, waiting for them to decide our family's fate. Ms. Mills opened the familiar manila folder. "I'll be direct with you both. The medical examination revealed no signs of physical abuse, no unexplained bruises, marks, or injuries. Both children appeared to be well-nourished and properly cared for." I felt David's hand squeeze mine. "The interviews were also illuminating," she continued. "Emma spoke very positively about both of you. She described feeling safe at home, talked about family activities, bedtime stories, help with homework. When asked directly if anyone had ever hurt her, she seemed genuinely confused by the question. "And Jake?" I asked. Robert Chen smiled slightly. "Jake spent most of his interview telling us about his dinosaur collection and asking if we wanted to see him do a somersault." When we asked about his parents, he said, and I quote, "Mommy gives the best hugs and Daddy makes funny voices when he reads stories." Relief flooded through me so powerfully I felt dizzy. However, Ms. Mills continued, and my heart sank again, we still need to investigate the source of these reports. The accusations were quite detailed and specific. Someone provided information about your daily routines, your children's schedules, even the layout of your home. David leaned forward. What kind of details? Whoever made the reports knew that Emma has a small scar on her knee from falling off her bike last summer. They knew Jake's favorite stuffed animal. They described your kitchen layout accurately and mentioned specific incidents allegedly witnessed. That sounds like family, I said quietly. Ms. Mills nodded. We had the same thought. Mrs. Walsh, you mentioned your mother-in-law. Can you tell us more about her relationship with the children? David ran his hands through his hair. My mother has always been controlling. She raised me as a single parent after my dad died when I was 10, and I think she has trouble accepting that I'm an adult with my own family now. How often does she see the children? Every other weekend. Usually, I answered. Sometimes she babysits when we have date nights or work events. She has a key to the house because she used to help out more when Emma was a baby. Robert Chen and Ms. Mills exchanged glances. Mrs. Walsh, we need to ask you something, and please think carefully before you answer. Has your mother-in-law ever expressed concerns about Sarah's parenting directly to you? David was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he finally admitted. More and more lately. She thinks Sarah is too young to handle the responsibility. Sarah's 8 years younger than me. She's made comments about how I rushed into marriage and started a family too quickly. What kinds of comments about Sarah specifically? She says Sarah doesn't have maternal instincts, that she's too focused on her work, not attentive enough to the kids. She's criticized everything from the clothes Sarah picks out for them to the food she cooks. I stared at my husband. You never told me it was that extensive. I didn't want to hurt you, and I always defended you. I thought I was handling it. Ms. Mills made notes. Has she ever suggested that the children would be better off with someone else? David's face went pale. 2 months ago, she asked me if I ever worried about leaving the kids alone with Sarah during the day. She said working from home wasn't the same as being a full-time mother, that Sarah might get distracted or frustrated. The pieces were clicking into place with horrible clarity. Margaret hadn't just disapproved of me. She'd been building a case against me. There's something else, I said slowly. Last month, Emma came home from Margaret's house and asked me why Grandma thought I was mean to children. I asked Emma what she meant, and she said Margaret had asked her lots of questions about whether Mommy ever got angry or raised her voice. Robert Chen set down his pen. Mrs. Walsh, we need to have a conversation with your mother-in-law. Based on what you've told us and what we found in our investigation, it appears someone has been systematically gathering information to build a false case against Sarah. You mean Margaret made this all up? David asked. We can't prove that, yet, Ms. Mills said carefully. But the pattern is concerning. False reports are a serious matter. They waste resources that should be used to protect children who are actually in danger, and they cause tremendous trauma to innocent families. She handed us a business card. You're free to take your children home now. We'll be conducting a follow-up interview with your mother-in-law within the next few days. I strongly recommend that you limit her access to your family until this matter is resolved. Walking out of that building with Emma and Jake running ahead of us toward the car, I should have felt victorious. We'd been cleared. Our children were safe. The truth had protected us, just as I'd hoped. But I also felt something darker growing inside me, a cold anger that Margaret had put my babies through this ordeal. Emma had asked twice on the way to the car if she was in trouble, if that's why the serious people had wanted to talk to her. Jake had cried during his medical exam, confused about why strangers were looking at his body. As we drove home, David reached over and took my hand. I'm going to call my mother tonight, he said quietly. What are you going to say? I don't know yet. But this ends now, Sarah. Whatever her problem is with you, with us, it ends now. I squeezed his hand back, but I had a sinking feeling that confronting Margaret would only be the beginning of a much bigger battle. Someone who would traumatize her own grandchildren to get back at me wasn't going to back down just because she'd been caught. David waited until the children were asleep before making the call. I sat beside him on the couch, close enough to hear both sides of the conversation. My stomach twisted in knots. Margaret answered on the second ring, her voice sickeningly sweet. David, honey, how wonderful to hear from you. I was just thinking about the children. How are my precious grandbabes? Cut the act, Mom. David's voice was ice cold. We need to talk. There was a pause. What's wrong, sweetheart? You sound upset. CPS came to our house this morning. They took Emma and Jake in for questioning and medical exams because someone filed reports claiming Sarah was abusing them. The silence stretched so long I wondered if she'd hung up. When Margaret finally spoke, her tone had shifted entirely. Oh my goodness, David. That's terrible. Is everything all right? Are the children safe? Don't. David's knuckles were white where he gripped the phone. Don't pretend you don't know exactly what this is about. I have no idea what you're implying. The person who filed these reports knew details only the family would know. They knew about Emma's scar, Jake's stuffed elephant, the layout of our kitchen. They had information about conversations that happened in our home. David, surely you're not suggesting that I'm not suggesting anything, Mom. I'm telling you. The investigators are going to want to speak with you, and when they do, they're going to find out that you've been the one making these accusations. Margaret's mask slipped completely. Maybe they should investigate. Maybe someone needs to pay attention to what's really going on in that house. David stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. What the hell is wrong with you? Those are your grandchildren. Exactly. They're my grandchildren, and I won't stand by and watch that girl destroy them. That girl is my wife and the mother of my children. She's a child herself, David. She was 22 when you married her, barely out of college. She doesn't know the first thing about raising children properly. I grabbed the phone from David's hand. I'm right here, Margaret. If you have something to say about my parenting, say it to my face. Sarah. Her voice dripped with false concern. I never wanted it to come to this, but someone had to speak up for those poor babies. What babies? Emma and Jake are happy, healthy, well-adjusted children. Ask their teachers. Ask their doctor. Ask anyone who isn't trying to sabotage our family. I've seen how you handle them when you think no one's watching. The way you snap at them when they're just being children. The way you shut yourself in. You're office for hours while Jake plays alone. I work from home so I can be available for them, and I've never snapped at my children in a way that would harm them. Haven't you? Margaret's voice turned calculating. What about when Emma spilled grape juice on your laptop 3 weeks ago? You raised your voice quite harshly then. My blood ran cold. I remembered the incident. Emma had been helping me organize my desk and accidentally knocked over her sippy cup. I had been startled and said, "Oh no," loudly, then immediately reassured her it was okay while we cleaned it up together. But Margaret had been there that day, babysitting while I ran errands. You were eavesdropping on us? I was protecting my grandchildren. And what about the time you made Jake sit in timeout for 20 minutes just for playing too loudly? He was having a tantrum and hitting his sister. The timeout was 5 minutes, and I explained to him why hitting wasn't okay. That's called parenting, Margaret. You left him crying alone in his room. David took the phone back. Mom, stop. Just stop. You've traumatized 2 innocent children today because of your twisted vendetta against my wife. This isn't about Sarah. Margaret's voice cracked. This is about those children needing proper care. They need stability. They need someone who understands what it means to be a mother. Like you? David's voice was deadly quiet. Like how you raised me? I did the best I could as a single mother. You were controlling and manipulative then, and you're still controlling and manipulative now. The difference is that I was a child who had no choice but to put up with it. Emma and Jake have two loving parents who will protect them from your poison. David, please, no. You've gone too far this time. You called CPS with false reports. You lied to government officials. You put my children through medical exams and interrogations because you can't accept that I have a life that doesn't revolve around you. I could hear Margaret crying on the other end of the line. I was just trying to help. I was worried about them. Bullshit, David said flatly. You were trying to break up my marriage. You've been trying since the day I brought Sarah home to meet you. You've criticized her cooking, her clothes, her career, her parenting, her age, her background, everything about her. And when none of that worked, you decided to try to have our children taken away. That's not. I would never. You just admitted it, Mom. You filed false reports with Child Protective Services. Do you have any idea what the penalty is for that? Do you understand that what you did today is a crime? The line went quiet, except for Margaret's ragged breathing. I want you to stay away from our family, David continued. Don't call. Don't come by. Don't send gifts. You are not welcome in our home anymore. David, you can't mean that. I'm your mother. Those children are my grandchildren. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy their lives to get back at their mother. I love those children more than anything. No, you don't. People who love children don't put them through what you put Emma and Jake through today. People who love children don't lie to authorities to try to have them taken from their parents. You love control, Mom. You love being right. You love being needed. But you don't love them enough to put their well-being ahead of your own ego. Margaret was sobbing now. Please don't take my grandchildren away from me. They're all I have left of your father. For a moment, David's resolve wavered. I could see the pain in his eyes. This was still his mother, the woman who had raised him alone after his father's death. But then he looked toward the stairs where our children were sleeping, probably having nightmares about the scary day when strangers asked them uncomfortable questions. You took them away from yourself, he said quietly. CPS is going to want to interview you in the next few days. I suggest you tell them the truth about why you filed those reports. And I suggest you think very carefully about whether you want to face criminal charges for filing false reports with a government agency. David, he hung up. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of what had just happened settling over us. David stared at his phone as if it were a foreign object. I can't believe I just cut off my own mother, he said finally. You protected your children, I replied, taking his hand. That's what good fathers do. She raised me alone for 8 years after Dad died. I know she's not perfect, but I never thought she'd do something like this. David, look at me. I waited until his eyes met mine. What she did today wasn't imperfect parenting or grandparent overreach. She filed false reports with the government to try to have our children removed from their home. She traumatized Emma and Jake. She wasted resources meant for children who were actually in danger. And she committed what could be a felony. That's not love. That's obsession and revenge. He nodded slowly. I know you're right. It's just hard to accept that my own mother would do something so calculating and cruel. The hardest part is over, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. We've confronted her. CPS knows the truth, and our children are safe. But as we headed upstairs to check on Emma and Jake one more time before bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret wasn't going to accept defeat gracefully. She'd spent months planning this attack, and I doubted she'd give up just because she'd been exposed. I was right to be worried. The next morning would bring revelations that would make Margaret's false CPS reports seem like just the beginning of her campaign against our family. 3 days after David cut contact with Margaret, I received a call that made my blood run cold. It was Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, and she sounded concerned. "Mrs. Walsh, I need to speak with you about something that happened during pickup today. Is this a good time?" I was in the middle of folding laundry while Jake played nearby, but something in her tone made me immediately stop what I was doing. "Of course. What's wrong?" An older woman approached Emma at the school gate this afternoon. She claimed to be Emma's grandmother and said she was there to pick her up because you were sick and couldn't come. My heart started pounding. What did Emma do? Emma was confused because the woman wasn't on her approved pickup list, and she told the woman that her grandma doesn't pick her up from school anymore. The woman became quite insistent, saying there had been a family emergency. "Please tell me Emma didn't go with her." No, she's safe. Emma followed our safety rules and came to find me instead of leaving with someone not on her list. But Mrs. Walsh, the woman became very agitated when I explained our pickup policies. She started saying things about Emma's home situation that were concerning. I sank into the nearest chair. What kinds of things? She claimed that Emma wasn't safe at home, that Child Protective Services was investigating, and that she was trying to protect her granddaughter. She seemed to know details about your family that made Emma visibly upset. Where is Emma now? She's right here in my classroom. She asked if she could stay until you arrived because she was scared. Mrs. Walsh, can you come to the school? I think we need to discuss this situation. I was already grabbing my keys and Jake's shoes. I'll be there in 10 minutes. The drive to Roosevelt Elementary felt endless. Jake chatted happily in his car seat, unaware that his grandmother had just attempted what could only be described as an kidnapping attempt. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, imagining what could have happened if Emma hadn't followed the school's safety protocols. Mrs. Rodriguez met me in the main office, where Emma sat in a chair that was too big for her, swinging her legs anxiously. The moment she saw me, she ran into my arms. "Mommy, Grandma Margaret was here, but she was acting weird. She said you were sick, but you're not sick." I held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "You did exactly the right thing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you for going to Mrs. Rodriguez instead of leaving with someone not on your pickup list." Mrs. Rodriguez closed the office door and sat down across from us. "Mrs. Walsh, I need to ask, directly, is Emma's grandmother supposed to have access to her at school?" "Absolutely not. My husband's mother is no longer allowed unsupervised contact with our children. We never authorized her to pick Emma up, and she's not on any of our emergency contact lists." The woman seemed to know quite a bit about your family situation. She mentioned a CPS investigation specifically. I felt Emma tense in my arms. We hadn't told her the details of what happened earlier that week, just that some people needed to make sure all children were safe and happy. "There was a CPS investigation," I confirmed quietly. "My mother-in-law filed false reports claiming I was abusing my children. The investigation cleared us completely, but it seems she's not willing to accept that." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded grimly. "I'm going to need to file an incident report about this. Attempted unauthorized pickup is a serious matter, especially when the person becomes confrontational." "What exactly did she say to you?" "She claimed that Emma was in danger at home, that the authorities were involved, and that she had a legal right to protect her granddaughter." When I explained that only people on our approved list could pick up students, she became very angry. She said the school was enabling child abuse by not releasing Emma to her. Emma pulled back to look at me, confusion clear in her 6-year-old eyes. "Mommy, why did Grandma Margaret say those things? Why was she so mad?" I struggled for an age-appropriate explanation. "Sometimes adults make mistakes when they're upset, honey. Grandma Margaret made some bad choices because she was confused about some things." Mrs. Rodriguez cleared her throat. "Mrs. Walsh, I need to inform you that we're going to have to increase security measures for Emma. I'm adding a note to her file that under no circumstances should she be released to anyone not specifically authorized by you or your husband. We'll also be alerting all staff to watch for this woman." "Thank you." I should probably give you a photo of her so everyone knows what she looks like. That would be helpful. She paused. I also think you should consider filing a police report. What happened today goes beyond family drama. This was an attempt to remove a child from school without parental authorization. The thought of involving the police felt overwhelming, but I knew she was right. Margaret had escalated far beyond anything I'd imagined possible. On the drive home, Emma was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke up from the back seat. Mommy, is Grandma Margaret going to try to take me and Jake away? The question hit me like a physical blow. No, baby. Daddy and I will never let anyone take you away from us. You're our children, and we love you more than anything in the world. But she said, whatever she said was wrong, Emma. Sometimes people say things that aren't true when they're upset. But you're safe, Jake's safe, and we're all going to stay together as a family. That evening, after the children were in bed, David and I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, researching restraining orders and documenting everything that had happened. The incident at Emma's school had shaken us both badly. I can't believe she tried to take Emma, David said for the third time. What was she thinking? She wasn't thinking, I replied, typing notes about our conversation with Mrs. Rodriguez. She's obsessed with the idea that she can somehow prove she was right about me being a bad mother. When the CPS investigation didn't go her way, she decided to take matters into her own hands. David's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and his face went pale. What is it? I asked. He showed me the screen. The message was from Margaret. You can't keep me from my grandchildren forever. I know my rights. She's not going to stop, I said quietly. David, she's not going to just accept this and go away. I know. He rubbed his face tiredly. I'll call the police in the morning and file a report about what happened at the school, and I think we need to talk to a lawyer about getting a restraining order. What about CPS? Should we tell them what happened? Definitely. Ms. Mills said to contact them if Margaret tried any further interference with the children. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. It was an unknown local number, but something made me answer it. Hello? Sarah? The voice was unfamiliar, hesitant. This is Jennifer Hartwell. I'm Margaret Walsh's neighbor. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I got your number from the school directory. I need to tell you something about what's been going on at Margaret's house. I put the phone on speaker and motioned for David to listen. What do you mean? I've been watching some disturbing behavior from next door. Margaret has been collecting things. Photos of your children, printouts of what looks like school information, even what appears to be your garbage. Our garbage? I've seen her going through your trash cans early in the morning before pickup. She's been taking things back to her house, and she's been making phone calls at all hours, yelling about custody rights and grandparents' legal standing. David and I stared at each other in horror. Mrs. Hartwell, how long has this been going on? Months. At least since summer. But it's gotten much worse in the past week. She's barely sleeping, pacing around her yard at night, talking to herself about legal strategies and evidence. Honestly, I'm worried about her mental state. Why are you telling us this? Because I saw her today, right after school hours, loading a bunch of files and papers into her car. She was muttering something about showing them the truth and getting those babies where they belong. I think she's planning something, and I don't think it's anything good. After Jennifer hung up, David and I sat in stunned silence. Margaret wasn't just angry or disappointed. She was having some kind of breakdown, and her obsession with our children was escalating to frightening levels. We need to call the police. Tonight, David said finally. This has gone way beyond family dysfunction. She's stalking us. She's collecting evidence for God knows what purpose. And she tried to abduct Emma from school. I nodded, but a chill ran down my spine as I thought about Jennifer's words. Margaret was planning something. And if her behavior so far was any indication, Whatever came next was going to be worse than anything we'd faced yet. The police took our report seriously, especially after we mentioned Margaret's attempted unauthorized pickup from Emma's school. Officer Patricia Kane, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, sat in our living room taking detailed notes while we recounted everything that had happened. "Mrs. Walsh," she said, looking up from her notepad, "what you're describing sounds like escalating stalking behavior. The garbage collection, the surveillance, the attempt to remove your daughter from school. These are serious crimes." "What can you do about it?" David asked. "We'll start with a wellness check on Mrs. Walsh Sr. If she's having the kind of breakdown your neighbor described, she may need psychological evaluation. We'll also document everything you've told us for a potential restraining order application." Officer Kane left with promises to follow up within 48 hours. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every sound outside our house. David installed additional locks on all the doors and checked the windows twice before coming to bed. The next morning brought another shock. I was making breakfast when my phone rang. It was Dr. Peterson from the Children's Pediatric Clinic. "Mrs. Walsh, I'm calling because we had an unusual situation yesterday. A woman claiming to be the children's grandmother came in requesting copies of Emma and Jake's medical records." My coffee mug slipped from my hands, shattering on the kitchen floor just like it had when CPS first appeared at our door. "Please tell me you didn't give them to her." "Of course not. We have strict privacy policies and she wasn't listed as an authorized person." But she became quite agitated when we refused. She claimed there was an ongoing custody case and that she had legal rights to the records. "There's no custody case. My husband and I have full custody of our own children." That's what we assumed. But Mrs. Walsh, she seemed to know quite a bit about the children's medical history. She mentioned Jake's ear infection from last month and Emma's allergy testing from the spring. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly weak. She must have gotten that information when she was babysitting. She's been planning this for months. There's something else. She left behind some paperwork, apparently by accident. It looks like she's been consulting with a family law attorney about grandparents' rights. The implications hit me like a truck. Margaret wasn't just having a breakdown, she was building a legal case to try to gain custody of our children. After hanging up with Dr. Peterson, I immediately called Ms. Mills at CPS. "I'm glad you reached out," she said when I'd finished explaining the latest developments. "We completed our interview with your mother-in-law yesterday, and I think you need to know what we found." My heart raced. "What kind of things?" "Mrs. Walsh, your mother-in-law has constructed an entire alternate reality around your family situation. She has files, thick files, documenting what she claims are incidents of abuse and neglect. Photos, written observations, even recordings. Recordings. Of what? Audio from inside your home, apparently recorded during her visits. We've listened to several of them and they're highly edited. Normal parenting moments have been cut and spliced to sound much harsher than they actually were." I felt sick. "She's been recording us secretly in our own home?" "It appears so. She also showed us what she calls evidence of the children's distress. Photos of Emma crying, videos of Jake having what looks like a tantrum. But when we asked for context, she couldn't provide any. It's clear these are normal childhood moments, that she's reframed as evidence of trauma. Is this legal? Can she record us without our permission? In our state, recording conversations you're a party to is legal. But using those recordings to build false cases against parents crosses several legal lines. We've referred the matter to the district attorney's office for potential fraud charges." I felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief that CPS saw through Margaret's fabricated evidence. Terror at the lengths she'd gone to build her case against us. "Ms. Mills, there's something else. Our neighbor said Margaret was loading files into her car yesterday, talking about showing someone the truth. Do you think she might try to take this evidence to another agency?" There was a pause. "That's concerning. If she's shopping this fabricated evidence around to different authorities, It could cause problems even though it's false. I'm going to flag your case file to prevent any duplicate reports from being taken seriously." After hanging up, I called David at work to update him on the morning's revelations. He listened in stunned silence as I described Margaret's secret recordings and fake evidence files. "I'm coming home," he said immediately. "We need to figure out our next steps." "David, you can't keep leaving work. Sarah, my mother is waging psychological warfare against my family. Work can wait." An hour later, we were sitting across from attorney Rebecca Martinez in her downtown office, laying out the full scope of Margaret's campaign against us. "This is one of the most extensive cases of grandparent overreach I've ever seen," she said, after reviewing our documentation. "The false CPS reports alone are serious, but combined with the stalking behavior, the attempted school pickup, and the fabricated evidence files, we're looking at potential felony charges." "What about a restraining order?" David asked. "Absolutely. Based on what you've shown me, I'm confident we can get a temporary restraining order within days, possibly tomorrow. The attempted unauthorized pickup from school is particularly compelling evidence that she poses a direct threat to the children." Attorney Martinez pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. "I need you to document everything, every phone call, every sighting, every incident, no matter how small. Keep a detailed log with dates and times, and I want you to install security cameras at your home immediately." "Security cameras?" "If she's escalating her behavior, you need evidence of any trespassing or surveillance attempts. Given what your neighbor described about her collecting your garbage and conducting surveillance, I suspect she's not done." That afternoon, David installed a doorbell camera and 2 additional security cameras covering our front and backyards. It felt surreal, turning our family home into a fortress to protect ourselves from his own mother. Emma noticed the cameras immediately when she got home from school. "Daddy, why are there cameras on our house?" David knelt down to her level. "Remember how we talked about Grandma Margaret making some bad choices? Well, the cameras help us make sure everyone stays safe." "Is she going to try to take me from school again?" "No, sweetheart. Your school knows not to let anyone take you except Mommy and me. And these cameras help the police keep our house safe too." That evening, as we were putting the kids to bed, our new doorbell camera sent an alert to David's phone. Someone was approaching our front door. We both rushed to the window, and there she was, Margaret, standing on our front porch at 9:30 p.m., holding what looked like a thick manila envelope. She didn't ring the doorbell or knock. Instead, she stood there for several minutes, staring directly at the camera. Then, slowly and deliberately, she opened the envelope and pulled out photograph after photograph, holding each one up to the camera lens. They were pictures of our children. Emma at her school playground, Jake at the grocery store with me, both kids playing in our backyard. Photos that could only have been taken through telephoto lens from a distance, without our knowledge. The message was clear. She'd been watching us everywhere we went, documenting our lives, and she wanted us to know. Finally, she put the photos back in the envelope, placed it carefully on our doormat, and walked away. But not before looking directly into the camera one more time and mouthing words that made my blood run cold. "This isn't over." As David called the police to report the incident, I realized that everything we'd been through so far, the CPS investigation, the school incident, the stalking, had just been Margaret's opening moves. The real battle was just beginning. The restraining order was granted the next morning. Judge Patricia Coleman reviewed our evidence for less than 10 minutes before signing the temporary order, which prohibited Margaret from coming within 500 feet of our home, the children's school, or any of us. "Mrs. Walsh," the judge said, looking directly at me, "I've been on this bench for 15 years, and I've never seen such a systematic campaign of harassment disguised as grandparent concern. This order will remain in effect for 30 days, at which point we'll have a full hearing to determine if it should be made permanent." Attorney Martinez walked us out of the courthouse with a satisfied expression. The judge was clearly disturbed by the evidence, the surveillance photos especially, Taking pictures of children without parental consent crosses several legal boundaries. What happens if Margaret violates the restraining order? David asked. Immediate arrest. No warnings, no second chances. And given the pattern of escalation we've documented, I suspect she'll test those boundaries sooner rather than later. She was right. That evening, Officer Kane called to inform us that Margaret had been arrested attempting to enter Emma's school after hours. The security guard had found her trying doors and windows around the building at 11 p.m. She told the security guard she was there to collect evidence of the school's negligence in protecting her granddaughter. Officer Kane explained. She had bolt cutters, a camera, and what appears to be burglary tools in her car. Burglary tools, lockpicks, pry bars, glass cutters. Mrs. Walsh, it looks like she was planning to break into the school to access records or plant evidence. We found detailed floor plans of the school building in her vehicle, along with Emma's class schedule and teacher information. David and I exchanged horrified glances. How did she get Emma's schedule? We're still investigating that. But the important thing is that she's in custody now. She'll be held pending a bail hearing tomorrow morning. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. Margaret was behind bars, unable to hurt our family or continue her surveillance, but the peace was short-lived. The next afternoon, Attorney Martinez called with troubling news. Margaret posted bail this morning. She's out. How is that possible? She violated a restraining order. Her attorney argued that she has no prior criminal record and poses no flight risk. The judge set bail at $50,000, which she apparently paid immediately. What does this mean for us? It means we need to be extra vigilant. The conditions of her bail include staying away from your family, but given her history, I don't trust her to comply. That evening, our security cameras captured something that made my blood run cold. At 3 a.m., a figure in dark clothing appeared, at the edge of our property line, exactly 501 feet from our house, just outside the restraining order boundary. The person stood there for over an hour, clearly visible in the camera's infrared footage. It was Margaret, and she was holding binoculars pointed directly at our children's bedroom windows. David called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived, she was gone. Officer Kane reviewed the footage with a grim expression. This is calculated stalking behavior, she said. She's testing the legal boundaries while continuing to terrorize your family. We'll use this footage to request that her bail be revoked. Bail hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. In the meantime, we lived like prisoners in our own home, constantly checking the security cameras, jumping at every sound, afraid to let the children play outside. Emma began having nightmares and asking repeatedly if the bad grandma was going to take her away. Jake started clinging to me whenever we left the house, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by anxiety. That broke my heart. This has to end, I told David Thursday night as we watched Margaret's silhouette appear once again at the property line on our security monitor. She's terrorizing our children even from a distance. It will end tomorrow, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. The judge has to see that she's not going to stop. Friday morning arrived gray and rainy, matching our mood as we sat in the courthouse waiting for Margaret's bail hearing. She sat across the courtroom, flanked by her attorney, looking nothing like the woman who had once baked cookies for David and tucked him in at night. Her hair was unwashed and wild, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes held an unsettling intensity as she stared at us throughout the proceedings. The prosecutor presented the evidence of Margaret's continued harassment, the nighttime surveillance, the violation of the restraining order's spirit, if not its letter, and expert testimony about the psychological impact on the children. When it was her attorney's turn to speak, he painted a picture of a grieving grandmother desperate to protect children she believed were in danger. Your Honor, Mrs. Walsh is simply a woman who loves her grandchildren and fears for their safety. Her methods may be misguided, but her intentions are pure. I wanted to scream. Pure intentions don't involve secret recordings, fabricated evidence, and terrorizing children in the middle of the night. But then something unexpected happened. Margaret herself asked to address the court. "Your Honor," she said, standing with an eerie calmness, "I need you to understand that those children are in serious danger. Sarah Walsh is an unfit mother, and my son has been brainwashed into protecting her. I have evidence, recordings, photographs, documented incidents that prove these children are being abused." Judge Coleman frowned. "Mrs. Walsh, these allegations have already been thoroughly investigated by Child Protective Services and found to be without merit. They didn't look hard enough." Margaret's composure cracked, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "I've been watching that house for months. I've seen things. I've heard things. Those children cry themselves to sleep because of what she does to them. Mrs. Walsh, please lower your voice." "You don't understand," Margaret was shouting now, her face red with fury. "Emma told me herself that her mother hits her. Jake showed me bruises. I have it all on tape." "Mrs. Walsh, you need to sit down." "I will not sit down while those children suffer," Margaret screamed, her face contorting with rage. "I raised my son better than this. He knows what she is, but she's got her claws in him. Someone has to protect those babies." Security officers approached Margaret's table as her attorney tried desperately to calm her down. But she was beyond reason now, her carefully constructed facade completely shattered. "You're all part of it," she shrieked at the judge. "The school, the police, the courts, you're all helping her hurt my grandchildren. But I won't let you. I'll expose the truth. I'll save them." As the security officers restrained Margaret, she looked directly at me with pure hatred blazing in her eyes. "This isn't over, Sarah. I'll never stop fighting for them. Never!" Judge Coleman banged her gavel repeatedly. "Bailiff, remove Mrs. Walsh from my courtroom immediately." As Margaret was dragged away, still screaming about conspiracies and her grandchildren's safety, the judge turned to address the courtroom. "I've seen enough. Mrs. Margaret Walsh's bail is revoked immediately. Given her continued threats and clear psychological instability, she will remain in custody pending a full psychiatric evaluation. Furthermore, I'm ordering a permanent restraining order protecting the Walsh family." 3 months later, Margaret was sentenced to 2 years in prison for stalking, filing false reports with government agencies, and attempted breaking and entering. The psychiatric evaluation revealed severe paranoid delusions and an obsessive personality disorder that had been exacerbated by her inability to control her adult son's life. David struggled with guilt over his mother's imprisonment, but therapy helped him understand that her actions were the result of mental illness, not his failure as a son. Emma and Jake slowly returned to their normal, happy selves once the threat was removed from their lives. CPS officially closed our case with a commendation for our cooperation and a note in Margaret's file preventing her from filing future false reports. Ms. Mills later told us that our case had led to new protocols for investigating family member accusations more thoroughly. Today, our children are thriving. Emma is excelling in 2nd grade, and Jake started kindergarten with enthusiasm and confidence. We've moved to a new house across town, not because we had to, but because we wanted a fresh start in a place unmarked by Margaret's obsession. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Emma hadn't been smart enough to refuse to leave school with Margaret that day, or if we hadn't had neighbors willing to speak up about suspicious behavior. The thought terrifies me, but mostly I'm grateful. Grateful for teachers who follow safety protocols, neighbors who care enough to get involved, investigators who see through lies, and a legal system that ultimately protected our family when it mattered most. Margaret Walsh taught me that sometimes the greatest threats to our children come from the people who claim to love them most. But she also taught me that truth, courage, and the love of a strong family can overcome even the most calculating evil disguised as concern. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.